executors, one who stood to gain a good deal should the child fail. The unscrupulous men then siphoned off as much of Jane's assets as they could, and only when Jane's mother managed to get the attention of the House of Lords did the law leap in and return the girl to the priory. But her troubles were not over. She was later abducted by a man called Walsh, his stepmother, Elfrith, who gave him a cup of wine. The king sat on his horse drinking, and doubtless embroidering a tiresome tale of the wild boar that got away, but he was cut off in full flow when someone reinforced the kick in the wine by surreptitiously stabbing him. Surprised, Edward spurred his horse forward and slipped from the saddle in his death throes, hanging on by one foot as the steed carried him simultaneously into oblivion and legend. His body could not be found, and the official story went out that the king had suffered a fatal fall while hunting. Meanwhile, ambitious Elfrith watched her own son, Ethelred, mount the throne. Things might have remained as they were had it not been for an outburst of miracles on the road between Corfe and Wareham. Nothing was seen, but to the accompaniment of a sound likened to rustling reeds, all manner of wayfarers abruptly found that their ailments had vanished. The blind and deaf had their respective senses restored. Cripples hobbled up and then sprinted home in record time. St. Dunstan sent some holy grave diggers to investigate, and in a shallow roadside grave they found Edward's punctured body, undecayed and with a telltale wound gleaming in the sunlight. In spite of the circumstantial evidence, no charge was brought against Elfrith, though she ended her days in repentance as a nun at Wherwell in Hampshire. Edward's pristine remains were taken to Shaftesbury in Dorset, which became a highlight of the pre-Reformation pilgrim circuit. Edward's empty tomb was unearthed at the abbey there in 1861, but some of his relics have survived at the Eastern Orthodox Church in Brookwood, near Woking in Surrey. Corfe Castle is open to the public. Edward, after a short delay, now rests in peace, but his horse is still heard trotting around Corfe Castle, presumably because its grave was never discovered. On the third Thursday in March, St. Clement Danes Church, Strand, London, holds its oranges and lemons service. The church is decorated with oranges and lemons, and after the 3:30 p.m. service, the fruits are doled out to children from St. Clement Dane Primary School. The bells chime out the old nursery rhyme at 9 a.m, noon, 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. The church was bombed in the last war, and the bells were rehung in 1957 at a cost greatly in excess of 5 farthings. The ceremony originated in the Middle Ages, when porters carried oranges and lemons to Clare Market via Clement's Inn, where a fruit toll was paid. The custom fizzled out at the end of the 19th century, only to be revived in its present church and children form in 1920. The fruit these days is donated by the city's Danish business and commerce, April the 5th still marks the boundary between the old and new financial years. So the 24th of March is Old St. Gabriel's Day. The Archangel is invoked by those waiting or looking for good news. As such, he is the patron saint of messengers, the post, and telephones. Gabriel basks under the grand title Prince of Fire and is in charge of paradise. His hobbies include playing the trumpet and giving surprising news to virgins. But the big task for which he is psyching himself up according to Jewish tradition is a scrap with the Leviathan, who will attempt to destroy the earth during the Messianic age. This grudge against all of creation is understandable, as God killed his partner, the only female Leviathan, to prevent these enormous sea monsters from breeding and taking over the world. As a handy byproduct of the slaughter, God made clothes for Adam and Eve from its skin. Come the final showdown, the distressing advance word for the Leviathan is that the predetermined hero Gabriel will win, helped by his last trump card. At the foot of southern England's highest cliff, Golden Gap, near Bridport in Dorset, are the remains of St. Gabriel's Chapel. An old story about its founding opens with a storm at sea. All seems lost until young Bertram and his wife offer a prayer, promising to build a church if only Gabriel will intervene. They keep repeating the prayer, and on the third night, Gabriel finally pitches in to save the boat. True to his vow, Bertram builds a chapel where the boat lands, and underneath the altar he places his wife, for although Gabriel rescued the boat, by the time he arrived, Mrs. Bertram had died. Gabriel could easily have intervened sooner. It is said that he takes just 2 moves to get anywhere. The angelic comrade, Michael, only takes 1 move. Their chess games must be swift, if predictable. Right, so let's see. Let's do the 25th of March, Lady Day. The giant hermaphrodite and the death dole crawl. March the 25th is the birthday of Adam, for service, waiting his moment. The arrows began to fly, the priest was wounded, and Ralph was killed. Robin then acted as decoy, leading Ralph's archers towards Rockingham Forest. 1.5 miles from Brigstock he threw his bow and arrows into a hollow in the bouquet's tree, and passing for a peasant, slunk back to rejoin his men. The legend exists to make sense of a long-gone feature called the bouquet's tree. It was probably an ancient moot point where the local court elite met to chat about forestry rights, ferret-legging and gratuitous Robin Hood stories. A nearby field called Bowcast suggests that it may have been something to do with archers and target practice. The tree itself died and was chopped up for timber several centuries ago, but such was its mythical importance that in the 17th century a commemorative stone was erected to mark where it stood, simply inscribed, "In this place grew Bouquet's tree." Right, let's go on a bit. Let's go to April. The 1st of April, All Fool's Day. Huntigauk, the April fish. The origins of April Fool's Day lie in several pagan spring festivals of jollity, such as the Roman end of winter orgy, Hilaria. No, that name is not an April Fool's trick. The smirking Celtic god Lud had his annual bash at the Old New Year, March the 25th. The festival of the vernal equinox, April the 1st, was the octave of this feast. There were 8 days of festivities, the first and last being the most important. Japery was first nature to Lud, the god who managed to overcome the 3 plagues of ancient Britain. These bizarre plagues were a tribe of malevolent, all-hearing demons, a Maytime shriek which killed all that heard it, and a curse that spirits Trafalgar Square or the Tower of London. The most successful con of this kind was in 1860, when a number of gentry turned up at the tower brandishing their gilt-edged invitation cards. Weddings are known as April Morns in misogynist circles, a side-splitting reference to the fact that a chap is making a fool of himself by settling down with a woman. All in all, April the 1st was an unfortunate date for the diggers to bring their rebellion to a head and proclaim common ownership of the land. Their brief 1649 headquarters at St George's Hill, near Weybridge in Surrey, is now deep in the uncommon ownership stockbroker belt. The diggers were sick and tired of elitism and monopolistic land use. This was in the early days of the Commonwealth. Charles I had been executed just 2 months earlier, but it was already clear that the wealth would be common to Oliver Cromwell's cronies, not to the peasants in the fields. Hence the diggers' short-lived communist uprising. A folk song of the time states their ambitions of cooperative equality using language that could have come straight out of the 1960s. To conquer them with love. No power is like to love. Sadly, it was past noon and the joke was on them. The movement was ruthlessly crushed and the diggers were sent to the gallows. Weather-wise, thunder is a good omen on April the 1st. If it thunders on All Fool's Day, it brings good crops and hay. But bad news for brewers and drinkers. If the month's eponymous showers put in an appearance, if April 1st sees cloud and rain, then beer will smell like an open drain. Let's see. Okay, let's do the 2nd of April. The One-Handed Ghost and the Theoretical Phantom. Lord Edward Stowell had an affair with his young sister-in-law, Honoria Stukely. This sort of thing always leads to trouble, and Honoria died. Stowell then expired on April the 2nd, 1755, of apoplexy. Soon afterwards, his bailiff, Isaac Mackerel, a man known to have a strange hold on Lord Stowell, also died, crushed when a woodpile collapsed on him. There followed some boisterous, prolonged hunting at Stowell's home, the old manor house, Hinton, Ampner, Hampshire. The leading characters were a man in a plain coat and a woman in a black dress, thought to be Edward and Honoria. As well as the manifestations of the ghostly couple, there were also thunderous bangs, groans, terrifying shrieks, heavy objects tumbling invisibly through the ceiling, and strange, tuneless, harmonic vibrations in the bedrooms. Despite hundreds of sightings and even an investigation by the army, nothing could shift the ghosts. So in desperation, the whole manor was torn down in 1793 and rebuilt just a few yards away. After the demolition, a tiny human or monkey skull was found in a box beneath the floorboards, and an old woman who used to work there came forward, claiming to know the dark secret behind the hauntings. About to be interrogated further, she promptly died, adding to the manor's mysteries. Lawford Hall, near Little Lawford on the outskirts of Rugby in Warwickshire, was unique in having a theoretical ghost. Smooth-talking Irishman Captain Donnellan had just married into the resident family, the Bortons. Within a year, the Borton heir, Sir Theodosius, was dead, Still protesting his innocence, Donlan was hanged at Warwick on this day in 1781. The family tried to prevent Donlan's young son from finding out about his father's crimes, but the story leaked out and he killed himself. The house, everyone decided, would doubtless be haunted after this terrible family history, and so it was vacated before anyone could prove the theory, standing empty until its demolition. And nearby Little Lawford Hall, the once hyperactive ghost of one-handed Broughton is now confined to one room and sporadic appearances in a coach and six. During the phantom's wild days, 12 clergymen attempted to oust it, but 11 of their exorcising candles mysteriously blew out. The parson, with a still burning candle, struck a deal with the ghost, not laying it, but forcing it to stick to one room. Just to be different, April the 2nd is Orkney's Fool's Day, and tricks here can only be played afternoon. Known as Tailing Day, the chief objective is to pin some embarrassing article or scrawled message of the "please kick me" type on the back of the victim. Pig's tails purloined from the butcher are favourite accoutrements. Elsewhere in Scotland it was not uncommon for the joke to span the full 48 hours. As witnessed in the saying, the 1st and 2nd of April, hunt the gowk another mile. Watch out for fog and rejoice in the wonderful homely rhyming of, if the first 3 days of April be foggy, rain in June will make the lanes boggy. Right, let's see. Some of these stories are quite funny. Here's one. So let's go to the 25th of April, St. Mark's Day. Froggy went courting. When King John visited Alnwick, he was appalled at the state of the roads. They were potholed, they were badly drained, they were poorly signposted, and worst of all, the mud on them had stained his best trousers. He summoned the officials of the town and persuaded them that either time was right for a massive inward investment in local transport infrastructure, or his swordsmen would introduce a contraflow into their bloodstreams. Within weeks, hasty but comprehensive carriageway repairs were underway across Northumberland, but still John was not happy. His trousers were ruined and he wanted revenge. So the king commanded the townsfolk of Alnwick to ride the roads and boundaries of the parish every year on April the 25th, taking an undignified route through Freeman's Well, a local pond. The boundary riders, dressed in white with white nightcaps and swords, had to canter to the well, paddle through its mud, and remount their steeds on the other side before completing the circuitous and pointless journey. The custom survived long after John and his trousers parted company, but got bypassed sometime in the dim and distant past. The mark of the 25th of April's feast is the famous one from the Bible, having perhaps written the eponymous Gospel. There is no evidence that he had any particular vendetta against frogs, unless somewhere amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls is St. Mark's letter to the amphibians, but St. Mark marks a traditional turning point in their croaking. For each day in which the frogs ribbit before April the 25th, they must observe a corresponding number of silent days, biting their front hinged tongues. Frogs are generally lucky. Meet one casually, croaking or silent, and you will soon find the jar, turning the frog into an amphibious Saint Sebastian, and to chant, "It's not this frog I wish to stick, but my lover's heart I wish to stick." This must be done for 9 nights on the trot, but it may be better to stick with celibacy, as if you kill a frog, you will have a sin grow on your back. 1 lover equals 9 impaled frogs. Few backs are broad enough to cultivate such a volume of sin. Farmhands must limit their activities today. If you plough on St. Mark's Day, one of the team will die within the year. One St. Mark's Eve custom which spills over into today will please foot fetishists everywhere. Scatter ash, chaff or beans on the hearth after the first stroke of midnight, and a sexy footprint will have appeared in the mess by breakfast time today. Then invite the entire town to pop round barefoot, match the print with a foot, and you will never be lonely between the sheets again. On the Isle of Man, what is important is the direction of the footprint. If it is facing inwards, then rejoice or panic, for a child is on the way. If pointing towards the door, it means death. If it has a broad pad and 3 forward-facing claws, you'll marry a badger. Right, let's do one more. Okay, 28th of April, Floralia, Saint of Vitalis Day. By Queen. As Elizabeth I entered Westminster Abbey on this day in 1603, she was not looking her best. Not only was she dead, but she had died more than a month beforehand on the March the 24th. With coffin wisely nailed tight, she was brought into the abbey and buried amidst much pomp and pomp. Elizabeth's ghost occasionally shortcuts through the library at Windsor Castle in Berkshire with hurried footsteps. She was also indirectly responsible for another ghost over at Richmond Palace in Richmond, Greater London. While the Queen was on her deathbed there, Sir Robert Carey was on horseback outside the gatehouse, waiting for a signal. As soon as the Queen died, her ring was slipped from her finger and thrown out of the window to Sir Robert. This was the signal, and he rode almost non-stop to the Royal Court in Edinburgh, covering the 400 miles in 62 hours, to break the news that James VI of Scotland had just become James I of England. The sound of Carey's horse galloping is still sometimes heard in Old Palace Yard at Richmond, and Elizabeth has occasionally been spied at the nearby site of the gatehouse. Elizabeth had done all she could to cling to life for as long as possible. Around her neck she always wore a piece of gold inscribed with mystic longevity-boosting characters, and she kept the Queen of Hearts under her favourite chair, held there by an iron nail punched neatly and deliberately through the forehead of the Queen on the card. Such actions are scarcely more superstitious than current blind faith in healing crystals or arthritis-inducing jogging. And they did Queen Elizabeth no harm. She died at the then ripe old age of 70. May the 1st has since time immemorial been a day of springtime celebration in Britain, but the Romans were too impatient and kicked off their festival on April the 28th instead. Floralia honoured their fruit and veg goddess, Flora. Our May Day concepts of mischief and lawlessness sprang from under the shady togas of the past. The custom of fetching chariot loads of greenery into the house was a Floralian fetish too. Some folklorists have even tried to establish Floralia as the direct historical and etymological stems from Flora and her festival, but the truth is that all the religions that once graced these islands had a Maying festival, and Flora's offshoots may be a little less lush and verdant than some classicism.